This video is sponsored by DevMountain. If you're interested in learning web development, iOS, or UX design, DevMountain is a 12-week design and development bootcamp intended to get you a full-time position in the industry. To learn more, visit devmountain.com or click the link in the description below. Hey, what's going on, guys? So I wanted to kind of mix it up today and do something a little different. We're going to be dealing with data visualization with Python and a library called Bokeh. But what this does is it allows us to take pretty much any data structure at all in any kind of file, whether it's a CSV or JSON file or hard-coded data, whether it's from a database, and we can create a visualization. So basically create charts, whether it's scatter plots or line charts or bar charts, and you can create some really cool stuff. So it's used a lot for like stocks and stuff like that. You can see some more examples on the website here in the gallery. But what we're going to do is something pretty simple. I found this article with some of the top highest horsepower cars in the world, and it gives us the car, it gives us the horsepower, the price, and the image. And what we're going to do is put all that stuff into a CSV file, a comma separated values file, and we're going to take that and create this horizontal bar chart from it, which lists the cars. We're only taking 8 of the 12, the top 8, and then the horsepower. And if we hover over either of these any of these bars here, you'll see that we get the car, the price, the horsepower, the image. So we also have a legend over here. We have some tools so we can, for instance, drag it around. We can select certain bars if we want. We can zoom in, zoom out. We can save it as an image. We can disable the tooltips. So it's a fairly simple example. I think that even if you're in the beginning stages of learning Python, I think you'll be okay. The way that it works as far as the browser goes is we can generate the HTML and the JavaScript, and what we're going to do is just generate the whole file. However, you can generate what are called components, which is just a script tag and a div. So if you wanted to take that and integrate it into any project you had, no matter what it was, it could be static HTML or PHP or React, Vue, something like that, or another Python framework like Django or Flask, anything at all you can integrate this library with. All right, so let's get started. Let's jump into VS Code. All right, so whenever we do anything with Python, it's good practice to create a virtual environment, and the best way to do that is by using pipenv. Okay, so you need Python installed, obviously. Once you have Python, you'll have access to pip, which is the package manager, and you want to install pipenv. Okay, once you run that, you'll have access to the pipenv command, and you want to run pipenv shell. And that's going to create a virtual environment. It's going to create this pip file, which will include any packages that you install. All right, so I'm going to clear this up, and we're going to now use pipenv to install Bokeh, and also we're going to install pandas so that we can use a CSV file, basically bring it in as a data frame and use that data. And you can see that they both got added to our packages. All right, so let's clear that up, and now what we want to do is create our Python file, which I'm just going to call main.py. And before I get into actually creating the chart for the car horsepower, I'm just going to do something very simple and just plot some numbers on a line graph or a line chart. So let's bring in, we'll say from bokeh.plotting. We want to import figure, which is used to create plots. We want something called output file so that we can tell it the name of the HTML file to generate, and then show is going to actually generate and show that HTML file. All right, as far as our data, I'm just going to create a list. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll go ahead and copy that down, and let's put some other numbers. We'll do 4, 6, 2, 4, and 3, and let's just change this variable to y. Okay, and now what we want to do is set the output file, and I'm just going to call it index.html. Okay, now we want to add our plots. So we're going to set a variable. I'm just going to call it p, and we're going to set it to figure. And this can take in multiple attributes. And if you look at the documentation, it'll show you everything that you can use. We're going to add a title. I'm just going to say simple example. And I'm just going to add a label for the X and Y axis. So X-axis label, let's just do X-axis. And we'll copy that down, and let's do Y-axis label. Oops. Okay, so that's our figure, or our plot, which comes from the figure function. And now we want to, let's render our glyphs. So there's different types of glyphs. Ultimately, we're going to be using an H bar, which is a horizontal bar graph. But right now, I'm going to use a line chart. So we're going to say p.line, and we want to pass in our data, which is X and Y. Okay, and we can add like a legend if we wanted to. So I'll say legend equals, I'm just going to do test. And then we can set the line width, since it's a line chart. Depending on the type of glyph, you'll get different attributes. So we'll set that to 2. And then finally, let's go ahead and show our results by running show and passing in our plot. Okay, so just this should actually create, wait a minute, what is this? Okay, so we're getting this because in VS Code, what you want to do is go to your command palette, so Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P, and if you type in Python, you'll get this select interpreter, and you want to make sure you choose your Pip-env environment. Okay, now you can see that red line went away. So we'll go ahead and save that. And now down here, we're just going to run our file. So let's say Python main.py. And there we go. So it generated this index.html, and you can see that it's marking our data. So X is just 1 through 5, and then Y we have 4, 6, 2, 4, 3. And if we look at our graph here, our chart, we have 4, 6, 2, 4, 3. Okay, so it's marking that on the Y-axis, and you can see these are our labels that we added to the figure. Now, by default, you're going to have, and the title is up here. We have the legend, but by default, you're going to have these tools. So this is to basically move it around if you want. We have the zoom in, zoom out, save, so you can actually save it as an image. Then we have the reset, and then this just goes to the documentation, and this top one goes to the home page. All right, and I'm going to show you later how you can add and remove certain tools here if you want. Okay, or if you don't want any tools at all, you can do that as well. All right, so that's how we can create a very simple visualization pertaining to some data. So now let's take it a step further and start to create our car's horsepower chart. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to just call it cars.csv. Okay, so this is the file that we want to grab the data from. Now I'm just going to paste this in. You're probably not going to want to type this in if you're following along, so I'll put the link to the GitHub repository in the description, and I'll have this file there. So basically this is just a CSV file. We have 4 fields: car, horsepower, price, and image. Okay, so you can see this first one is the Hennessy Venom F5, 1600 horsepower, 1.6 million for the price, and then it has a link to the image. Okay, so we have 8 different cars with these 4 fields. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and let's go back to our main.py file here. And let's see, we're not going to be using this data. So what I want to do is read in CSV, and we're going to use pandas for that. So I'm going to create a variable called df for data frame, and we're going to set that to pandas dot, and then there's a method called read underscore CSV. I'm sorry, we need to bring in pandas. So import pandas. All right, so we're going to read CSV, and we just want to pass in the name of the file, which is going to be cars.csv. All right, now later on we're going to be using something called ColumnDataSource, but for now I'm just going to put the data frames for each field directly in a variable. So let's say car, set that to df, and we want the car column. Okay, then I'll set a variable for horsepower, HP, set that to DF, and we want horsepower. Okay, now we're going to leave this because we still want to generate an index HTML. Let's go down to our figure, and since we're using an H bar glyph, which is a horizontal bar chart, we need some stuff in here such as Y range. So basically the data for the Y range, and that's going to be the cars. Okay, our car, we're going to set it to this variable here. Let's see, I also want to add, put a comma here, we want to add a plot width, which I'm going to set to 800. Okay, so this is just pixels. And then let's do plot height. And if you guys want to change this, that's fine. I'm going to set this to 600. Okay, and then for the title, let's change this simple example to cars with top horsepower. Now, we don't need a y-axis label because it's just the name of the cars. However, the x-axis label, I'm just going to say horsepower. Okay, now here's where we can actually set the tools. I'm going to show you if we set tools to nothing, it'll actually get rid of them all. So I'm going to do that for now, but I'm going to add some later on. Now down here where we create our glyph, we're not using a line anymore. We're using H bar. Okay, and if we go to the documentation, let's see. So I'll just search for it. There's a lot of documentation. So search for H bar. So you can see right here, Bokeh model glyphs H bar. And it gives you some examples. They're using the ColumnDataSource, which we're going to use in a little bit. But if you look over here, you'll see some of the other glyphs. So we have line, which we just looked at. We have V-bar, which is a vertical bar chart. We have step, patch, oval, arc. And just to give you some idea of what some of these look like. Bezier, however you say it, ellipse, hex. So there's a bunch of different things you can do. Some of them are really advanced. So back to our file here. In the H bar, let's just clear all this out. And we'll go on a new line. So we need to set a Y value, which we're going to set to the car. Okay, just like up here we said the Y range is going to be the car. Down here we just want to set Y to car. And this will give you, I want to go back to that documentation. This will give you the different properties. Okay, so all of these, so you can see, where is it? So right here, Y. So property type, this is the Y coordinates of the centers of the horizontal bars. So the data for the Y coordinates. We also need right. So right is going to be horsepower because that's what we want at the bottom. So let's go and say right. Set that to our HP variable, our horsepower. Left is going to be just 0. And then we can set the height of each bar, which I'm going to set to 0.4. We can set a color. I'm going to show you how to create a color map later so that each bar can be a different color. For now, we're just going to make them all solid orange. Okay, and then let's see, we can also add a little bit of opacity. If we say fill alpha, and let's set that to 0.5. And I think that should be good for now. Okay, now down here, actually, I think that's good. Let's try and run it. So we have our show. So it should generate the file. So we'll run that. And there we go. So we have our title, cars with top horsepower. We have our y-axis data, which is the cars. And then down here, on the x-axis, we have the horsepower. And notice that there's no tools. It does have this little icon, which brings you to the Bokeh library website, but none of the tools show. Now, if we want to add tools on our own, we can do that. So let's go up to tools, and let's say we want the pan, so that's how, so we can move it around. Let's say we want the box select, so we can select certain boxes or certain parts of the visualization. And again, you can check the documentation out for more of this stuff. We want zoom in. Let's do zoom out, and let's do save. All right, so if we save that, we run this again, and now you can see we have our tools. Okay, if we use the box select, we can go ahead and select certain boxes. All right, we might want to add the reset too as well. I think it's reset. Let's try it. So I'll run that again. And yeah, there it is. So that way, if we were to, let's say, select a couple of these and we want to reset it, we can. And you can, again, save it as an image too. So let's see. The next thing I want to show you is how we can use a column data source. Instead of just putting them in direct variables like this, we're going to bring in up here from Bokeh plotting, we're going to bring in column data source. Okay, now we're using this because it allows you to do extra things such as tooltips, stuff like that. So instead of setting these variables, I'm actually going to just get rid of these. And let's say we want to create a column data source from the data frame. So we're going to create a variable called source, set that to column data source, and just pass in our data frame, which we got from the CSV using pandas. Okay, now down here we have to change a couple things. So for the glyph, the H bar, we can actually now pass in source and set that to the source variable above. And now instead of using these variables here, we can actually use the column names. So we can put in quotes here, we can say car, which is going to now pertain to this. Okay, so we want to match that. We also want horsepower. So let's get rid of this and let's say horsepower. All right, now we do have an issue because up here, when we're using an H-bar glyph, we have to include a Y range in the figure, and we don't have the car variable anymore. So what we can do is let's actually create a variable for the car list, because this takes in a list. So I'm going to say car underscore list, and we can take from the source the data, so source.data, and car. Okay, so we want the car, and then there's a method called toList. Actually, it's all lowercase, toList, like that. And then we should be able to just pass in right here, car list. If you want to just pass this in right here and not create the variable, of course you can do that as well. But that should work. Okay, so we should still be able to generate our chart. So let's try it. Okay, so now you can see it still works. Now, you see how every time I run show, it creates a new tab? You can also use save if you want. So what I'm going to do, and you guys don't have to do this, but I'm going to bring in save up here. And down at the bottom, I'm going to comment this out. And let's say save file. So I'm just going to call save instead of show and pass in P. So now when I run it, it's not going to open up a new tab automatically. I'm just going to go to index.html and I'm going to use my live server extension. And I wanted to show you guys this too. So let me just fix this up a little bit with Prettier. So this is what it creates for us. An HTML file with the style sheet for a bokeh, the CDN for the JavaScript, and then there's a div with the class of bkroot. Okay, so that's where the chart is inserted. And then we have a script. This is all the JSON data, and then down here we have our JavaScript. So it generates all this stuff for us. So even if you just know Python, you don't have to know any JavaScript to deal with this. All right, but yeah, I'm going to open this with live server. So now I can just reload every time we make a change, every time we run python main.py. All right, so let's see. We have column data source. Now I want to work on the tooltips. So there's actually, let's see, there's a tool we can bring in. Let's go up top here and let's say from bokeh.models.tools, I'm going to import the hover tool. And then down here, let's go under the H-bar glyph and let's say add tooltips. So I'm going to set a variable called hover, and I'm going to set it to that hover tool that I just brought in. Not hover tool. Hover tool. And we can do this a couple different ways. We could just create I believe a dictionary of tuples where we can just have different fields, but you can also put HTML and you can basically format it however you want. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say hover dot tooltips, and we want to set it. We want to use the triple quotes here, triple double quotes, and inside here we can put our HTML. So I'm going to put a div, and inside here we'll put an H3, and then whenever we want to access the data for that particular tooltip, we can use the @ symbol. So we can say @car, okay, since I want to put the car in the H3. And then I'm going to put a div, can't use Emmet here, let's put a div, and in here I'm going to put a strong tag. Okay, so this is going to be the price. So we'll say price, and then we can access the price with the @ sign and then price. Okay, so any fields that you have in that CSV file you can access. Now I'm going to copy this down because I also want to put the horsepower. So right here, let's just do we'll just do HP, and then we even have the image, so we can put that in here as well. Let's get rid of all this stuff in the div. And then we'll put in an image tag with a source, and the source is going to go to I think it's just called image, right? And then we'll put an alt, and I'll just leave that blank. Okay, so that's our tooltip. Actually, we want to make sure we put a width because these images are pretty big. So let's set a width of 200. All right, now the last thing we need to do for these to show up is take our plot variable here and just call add tools and pass in hover. That's it. Okay, so actually I'll just put this up here. Let's save it. Let's run python main.py, and let's go back to our browser here and reload. And now you'll see as I hover over, we get the car, the price, the horsepower, and the image, which is pretty cool. And again, you can format it however you'd like. All right, so let's see. Next thing I'm going to show you is the color frames, or I should say color mapper. Now, there's different ways to do this. We're going to use something called factor CMap. So we want to go back into our document here, into our code, and let's bring in this is actually from Bokeh transform. And we're going to import factor underscore CMap. Okay, so basically we're going to add a color palette based on a factor, and that factor is going to be the horsepower. Now, you can create your own color palettes, but there are some available, so I'm going to use one that's from Bokeh. So let's say bokeh.palettes, palettes, and I'm going to use one called Blues 8. So Blues 8, and it's just different shades of blue. And then to implement this, we're going to go down to our H-bar glyph, and instead of color, we're going to do fill color, and we're going to set this to the factor CMap. Okay, and this is going to take in a couple things. It's going to take in the factor, which is car. I'm sorry, I said horsepower, but we're saying car. And then we're going to set the palette to Blues 8, which we brought in above, and the factors. I'm sorry, car, this is not the factor, this is just the title. The factors go here. And we don't have access, well, actually, I think we can just do car. Let's try that. We should be able to do that, I think. So I'm going to save this, and let's go ahead and run this. Invalid syntax. Oh, we need a comma right here. Let's see. Okay, so expected an element of either sequence got car, so it's talking about our factors. Okay, so you know what we're going to do is use our car list variable, this right here, just like we added for the y range. Let's add car list, see if that works. Okay, so let's go back, and there we go. So now we have the blues. Now this is really light because we have the alpha, so I'm going to set the fill alpha to 0.9 and run that again, and now it's a little darker. Okay, so let's see, we can also add a legend, okay, if you want to have a legend for each car. So to do that, we're going to go, let's see, let's go to right under the H bar. Let's say add legend. So we can do p.legend.orientation. Okay, so you can basically set it to either vertical or horizontal. I'm going to do horizontal. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to do vertical, not horizontal, because I want it to fit right in here. So I want it to go vertical, otherwise it'll go all the way across. And I mean, you can add margin and padding, and there's all types of stuff you can do, guys. This is very basic compared to some of the stuff that you can do. So let's see, we also want the location of the legend. So let's do p.legend.location, and I'm going to do top right. Okay, so you can do like top left, top center, bottom right, bottom left, whatever you want. And then I'm going to just make the font size a little smaller. So let's do p.legend.label underscore text underscore font underscore size, and set that to, let's do 10 pixels. All right, so we'll go ahead and save that. Let's run the file. Oh, I'm sorry. In order to use the legend, we have to go into our glyph here and just say legend. And let's set that to car. Needs to know what to put in the legend. And there it is. So now each car has its own legend with the specific color from the palette. All right, so hopefully this stuff is making sense. And I know it's pretty basic, but you can come up with different ideas for different types of data. And, you know, the H-bar glyph is just one of many. So if you want to check out some of the other ones, you can even have controls and stuff like that. Maybe we can look at some of the examples after. But the last thing I want to do is show you how we can basically generate, like I said, a div and a script tag if you wanted to put this into another file. So to do that, we would go up top here and bring in components, which comes from, I believe it's Bokeh embed. So Bokeh.embed, and we want to bring in, not equals, we want to import components. All right, and then once we do that, we could go down to the bottom here, and let's say print out components, or print out div and script, not crypt. So we can create a variable for script and div and set that equal to component, and then components, and then pass in our p value. Now that'll create it, and it's up to you what you want to do with it. You could print it to a file. You could even insert it automatically into an HTML file, but I'm not going to go through all that. I'm just going to simply print them out. So let's print out the script. We'll print out the div and then the script. Alright, so let's try that. So we'll clear this up and we'll run this. And now you'll see what it printed out, if we go to the top, is right here. So this is where we ran it, and it printed out this div. So you would take this and put it wherever. It could be a React application, it could be something, anything at all. Any HTML file, PHP file, and then just add this script right here. So all this stuff, this has the JSON inside of a variable, and then some JavaScript down here, and it will basically insert it into the DOM. Okay, so you can put it into any file you want. And like I said, there's ways to insert it automatically into an existing file, but it's a little more advanced than I want to get in this tutorial. Alright, so I think that's pretty much it, guys. So if this is something that interests you, data visualization with Python, I would highly recommend that you go and try to create something yourself, because that's exactly what I did. I found this library, I looked at the documentation, found some kind of article that had a little bit of data that I could take and use and create something from. And that's how you learn. So you're not going to learn much just by copying the code. So really try and understand it. Documentation is probably the best resource for learning just about anything, even better than tutorials. So as long as it's good documentation. So, I mean, if we want to take a look at some of the stuff that we can create with this library, let's see, let's go to the home page, and if we go to gallery, and let's see, this is interactive query tool for IMDb, which is the big movie database. And you can see that all these little plots, I believe this is a circle glyph, they're all movies, and they have the title, the year, the amount they made at the box office. And you can have little sliders over here, so as I slide this back and forth, it's going to raise the amount in millions. So this is 102 million. All these movies made at least 102 million. So we'll bring this way up, and you can see we have The Dark Knight Rises, 448 billion, The Avengers, 623 billion. So it's pretty cool. We can go by genre, the year released. So you could add controls like this, which is really cool. And Python is great for anything that has to do with data. Let's see, this is a weather map. So this shows the record, the average, and the actual for different cities. So we have Boston, which is freezing right now. Seattle, what's this? Distribution, discrete, smooth. So a lot of stock market stuff this is used for. We even have this like 3D stuff like this. So there's a lot you can do with this library. So I know this is something different. It's not, the usual stuff that I deal with, but I wanted to do something different. I want to start venturing out into other stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and even if it's not something you're going to use in your career or whatever, just play with it. Doing any kind of programming it's gonna make you a better programmer, even if it's not stuff you're going to use every day. It's still training your mind to think in that way. All right, so thanks guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.